Hello, a very warm welcome to you all, wherever you are watching from today. My name is Brother Govindananda, and as always at this point in our convocation, Thursday, which is known as Guru's Day in India, we'll be talking about the Guru-disciple relationship, one of the most important topics or aspects of the spiritual life. And our class today is entitled Walking in the Guru's Footsteps. I remember a few years ago, one of my fellow devotees, who I had met somewhere on tour, called me up and he wanted to talk. He was going through a very, very difficult situation. And I wish I could tell you the details because it was really quite dramatic, but I can't, of course. But we talked for a bit. He told me what was going on. And at the end of the conversation, he said, please pray for me. And of course, I said I would. And I said I would also submit his name to our worldwide prayer circle. And we finished the conversation. And time passed, a couple of months, and I was wondering what had happened to this situation. I knew that it wouldn't go on forever. It would last a certain amount of time, but I thought, surely he has come to the end of this particular situation. And one day he called me up out of the blue, and he said, I just wanted to let you know what happened, what transpired in that situation we talked about a couple of months ago. And I told him I was really glad to hear from him. And he said, I can't explain it. It was an extremely difficult situation. And I prayed so hard to Guru during my meditations, but frankly, I also prayed very hard to Guru as often as I could during the day, because I knew I needed all the help I could get. And it worked. And he said, do you want to know the details? Do you want to know exactly what happened? Now, I had heard stories like this on quite a few occasions before this particular devotee told me his story. I mean, everybody's story is interesting because the details are always different. But I had a good sense of what might have happened. But nevertheless, I said, well, certainly, tell me what happened. And he said, well, it's like this. And again, like he said, I can't explain it, but everything seems to be working okay. It's worked out fine, no matter how bad things got. Somehow I got the help I needed at the time I needed it. I can manage things, no matter how many things are coming to me at once. And he said, and beneath it all, I always had the feeling of God and Guru, a subtle presence that they were with me. He said, and more than that, he said, it's like everything is right in the world. Everything is fine, even as my life was crashing down around me. And he said, I wouldn't have wished what I had gone through on anybody, but I'm really glad I had that experience. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. And I wouldn't give up this feeling I have now for anything in this world. And as he spoke, I remembered the first time I had had a similar experience like this, where I felt, and this is the way I experienced it at the time, and this was it's many years ago now. I was working in Korea at the time, and I had had these feelings of just everything was working out fine. And again, in my case, there were difficulties in the work, difficulties in the particular group I was working with, but praying to God and Guru, everything seemed to work out anyway. And I was going home after work one day, and I was just feeling these wonderful feelings like this devotee had been describing. And I kept repeating to myself, why didn't they, they meaning the Gurus and the saints, why didn't they tell me that life could be this good? Why didn't they tell me? Again and again. The irony, of course, is that the Gurus and the saints spent their lives trying to tell us just how good life can be. But that was my experience at the time. Why didn't they tell me things could be so good? And perhaps they thought there was a little bit of criticism implicit in the way I was thinking about things, because I was walking past a driving range, for golf. And things were pretty safe. It was a really high fence. But all of a sudden, a golf ball came whizzing through that fence about 5 or 6 feet in front of me. And I stopped and I thought, okay, I'm sorry. I'll take it whatever way I can get it. And I will not criticize how it comes to me. Thank you. And it was like it's like a conversation that begins to grow between you, the disciple, and the guru. And again, we wouldn't give up these feelings for anything in the world. These feelings, this realization, is just the beginning of the guru-disciple relationship. My reaction to this experience, my first experience of this kind, was very impersonal, as I've said. Why didn't they tell me it could feel this good? But over the years, as we progress, and we learn to trust the guru more and more, and we let down the various guards and defenses that we didn't even know were there at the beginning of the path, these feelings, they become more and more personal. And then we find we are expressing our gratitude more and more directly. Thank you. Thank you. This is one of the great blessings of the guru-disciple relationship. It makes the spiritual path very intimate, not just a process to follow so that we can get, liberated and get out of here, which was certainly something that was very appealing to me when I first read Autobiography of a Yogi. If you had to walk through a dangerous jungle to get somewhere, would you prefer to do it alone? Or would you prefer to do it with somebody at your side that knew every danger that you were about to face before you faced it? That's what the guru is. So this fellow devotee was feeling wonderful, but if I had called him a few months later and asked, how are you feeling now? What would his answer have been? Because we all know that feelings like this, they reach a peak of intensity. And certainly at the beginning of our spiritual path, they do tend to fade away over time. So, what do we do then? Do we have to put ourselves through the ringer every time we want to progress spiritually? Well, before we get into that, I need to back up because I haven't even defined what a guru is. And for some of you watching, this is going to be a new concept. Let's keep it simple. A guru is someone that has the ability to help us attain the awareness of God that we want to attain. Think about your concept of a guru for a moment. Just allow the term to conjure up whatever thoughts and feelings come to mind. I'll give you a few seconds. What comes to mind for you? Okay. Now let's take a different perspective. In the same way that any one of our human relationships can be much deeper if we can see things from the perspective of the other person, we can immediately gain a deeper understanding of the guru-disciple relationship if we imagine ourselves looking out of the guru's eyes. What is it he sees when he looks at his disciples? You, perhaps. After all, Paramahansa Yogananda opened his Autobiography of a Yogi this way. The characteristic features of Indian culture have long been a search for ultimate verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship. Disciple-guru. The guru puts us first. Try to read Paramahansa Yogananda's poem, God's Boatman, or When I Am Only a Dream, or When I Take the Vow of Silence, as if you were the guru. These are all in Paramahansa Yogananda's book, Songs of the Soul. And I'm going to quote a little bit from one of these poems, God's Boatman, in a minute. But again, put yourself right into the scene as the guru, as I read these words. Feel that they are your words. You, as the guru, talking to God, to what Paramahansa Yogananda described as God's listening presence. Okay? I quote, I want thine everlasting bliss, only that I may share it with others, that I may show all my brothers the way to happiness forever and forever in thee. Imagine that. Feel that. Read these poems again and again in this way, and see how this exercise alone can help the concept of the guru-disciple relationship come alive for you, become real, even if you haven't yet started to meditate. Did you have the thought, well, that all sounds a bit egoistic, really? Imagining yourself to be the guru? Au contraire, mes amis. You will see that during this visualization, you have taken a vacation from your ego. When you are done, you will be able to see yourself more objectively. You will have a deeper understanding of what the guru is doing for you, a deeper appreciation for all that he is doing for you, and a greater desire to do what is for your own highest good. I don't know that there's any limit to how far this simple exercise can take you. We'll try it ourselves in the guided meditation at the end of the class, using When I Am Only a Dream as a guided meditation. Now let's get back to the problem we have set ourselves, which is how to stay continuously aware of those "why didn't they tell me it could feel so good" feelings. And not only that, but how to deepen those feelings, make them more personal, more integral to the very core of our being. And again, we're searching for a method that doesn't necessarily require us to learn to skydive or fly a wingsuit, something that, doesn't ramp up the terror, something a little easier. Well, what about a little bit of fear? Just a little bit. That might do the trick. Maybe that would be enough for us to remember to call on God and Guru for help and jumpstart the rest of the process. And indeed, if you know the Bhagavad Gita or the autobiography of a yogi, and you've watched any of a number of our online talks, you'll know that facing our fears is actually the starting point for the spiritual path. And any exceptions you can find to this merely prove the rule. Well, if it's that simple, all we have to do is ask ourselves, what am I afraid of? But here's where Maya, cosmic delusion, comes in and makes us forget that we have those fears in the first place. Well, what's so bad about that? Can't spiritual progress and attunement with the Guru happen without being aware that we have fears? Not when we realize that what these fears represent, the next things we must face on the spiritual path. This is why, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Arjuna's mother Kunti tells Krishna, "Krishna, bless us that we will suffer always, therefore we will remember you always." By the way, it's not as if Maya doesn't want us to be afraid at all. Oh, she's plenty happy for us to be afraid, as long as it's afraid of those things that preoccupy us and prevent us from getting to the things that we really need to do to grow spiritually. But what can we do about this? How can we outwit Maya? She's had, billions of years working at her skills. How can we distinguish between fears that are just distractions and fears that we really need to deal with? Well, I think we can begin by asking ourselves a different simple question. What am I avoiding? What am I avoiding? Well, what are we avoiding? I'll go first. I've told this story before, but it's very relevant here. Some years ago, I thought, I'm not meditating as deeply as I should be. What's going on? I knew that we have to be patient, and I knew I needed more of that. And I accepted that I could have been more methodical in the past. And I also knew that I could have done with a little bit more devotion, and so on and so forth. But I thought, no, there's something else going on here. And then the thought came to me very strongly. It was like, it wasn't me. I'm not trying to say it was a vision or anything like that, but it was like a voice I could hear inside my head. What would it mean if God came to you right now And because the question didn't feel as it was coming from me, it took me by surprise. And I hesitated. And that was, that was a great shock to me. I mean, as quickly as I could, I recovered and I said, yes, absolutely, that's what I want. But no, I knew there was a little hesitation. And I was very embarrassed by that. I was already a monk. So for weeks I thought about it. Like, where did that hesitation come from? The answer, of course, should have been obvious. It came from the ego. It's very simple. And I realized that I was afraid that if I did go really deep in meditation, God or Master, the Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, one who is master of himself, would come to me and say, there needs to be some changes around here. And I didn't know what those changes would be, but I knew that I didn't want to make them. I hadn't gotten yet to the point of asking the question, what am I avoiding? And because I hadn't asked that question, I ended up also avoiding God and Guru, although I was not conscious of that. This all goes on underneath the conscious level. But when we stop avoiding things in our life, our defenses can come down, and then we find that we are more open to advice, correction, discipline, and our spiritual life can open up. We might be meditating, and we might even be enjoying it, but we won't be going as deep as we could be because we're afraid to. We haven't yet surrendered. And this is why I didn't just say at the beginning of the talk that meditation is the answer. It is certainly part of the answer, and maybe even most of the answer. But to get the most out of it, we have to understand how we are meditating. We might have laser-focused attention and concentration at work, even if it's the most boring work in the world. And then we sit down to meditate, and it's like, where did my concentration go? And if that is happening to you, it's often because at a deep level that we might not be aware of, we haven't surrendered. Well, that was my problem, or one of them. What about you? What are you avoiding? The thing is, I don't think the specific things each of us is avoiding are all that important. It's what we feel about a particular issue that determines whether it is an issue in the first place. But that doesn't mean either that the feelings are the problem. It's the fact that we tend to avoid those feelings. Our focus is on the thing that arouses the feelings, but it is really the feelings that we're trying to avoid, because it's different for different people. So it's not inherent in the object itself. Anyway, back to the question. We're introspecting, and we've asked, what am I avoiding? Maybe you can try this, and something comes to mind, and it's a good candidate. But now we get into a dialogue with the ego, and the ego starts to throw out excuses. The first excuse is often, look, I'm not avoiding that. I'm just too busy. This is a common excuse. Strange, though, the different things we can find time for in the middle of even the busiest day. But if we press the issue, the ego might say, look, I know I'm not doing this or that, but it's not avoidance. It just bores me. And if we get past these first two defenses, we start to get somewhere, and we might get a bit of honesty out of the ego now. We might hear the ego say, yes, okay, I'm avoiding that, but what would be the point of trying anyway? I'm not worthy. I don't deserve it. Push past that, and you might hear, look, I don't want to surrender. I don't want to be vulnerable. I want to follow the spiritual path on my terms. Push past that, if we have the courage, and we might hear, of course I'm avoiding that thing. It terrifies me, and I don't want to be afraid. It is a horrible feeling. And that's the truth, isn't it? When we really get to the bottom of our many excuses, we find that we've uncovered the fear that had hidden itself. We're afraid of being bored. We're afraid of working too hard. We're afraid of our shame. We're afraid of our guilt. We're afraid of being vulnerable. We're even afraid of being afraid. The levitating saint told Paramahansa Yogananda, as recounted in his autobiography of a yogi, the world is full of uneasy believers in an outward security. Their bitter thoughts are like scars on their foreheads. The levitating saint really had a way of putting it in plain terms. But recognizing all this is a huge step. And if it seems like we found ourselves right back at the beginning where we began the talk, that is, dealing with a major crisis, that's not the case at all. There's a big difference between facing, say, a crippling illness or choosing to try to improve a damaged relationship. That will only get worse if we don't make the effort to face it and try to fix it. I want to say a little more about this issue of vulnerability. I think it's so important. It doesn't mean weakness, not at all. But we have to keep coming back to it, keep working at it, because the ego, to be honest, it really hates the feeling of being vulnerable. And obviously, there are many situations in life where, it's good not to be vulnerable, but our relationship with the guru is not one of them. I once met a devotee. She was so devotional. I was really quite jealous. So we talked for a bit, and perhaps I made a comment something like, well, with devotion like yours, meditation must be so easy. And she admitted to me she wasn't meditating. And at that time, it really floored me, to be honest. I thought, she's got a guru, she's got meditation techniques, she has devotion like you wouldn't believe. And she's not meditating? I couldn't make sense of it, to be honest. But then later on, when I had my own experience about uncovering the fear that I had at the time of going deeper in meditation, I realized what was going on. Again, it's the ego. So I decided that for myself at least, devotion, to be effective, has to include the courage to surrender. Devotion has to include the courage to surrender. If it doesn't enable us to surrender, what good is it really, It makes life very beautiful in very many ways, but it's not helping to free us in the way that it could be. Asking the question, what am I avoiding, is a great first step in taking the guru-disciple relationship to that deeper level that we've all felt at times, and that I described in the opening story. Let's call that the courage to introspect. But the next step is finding the courage to act. And where are we going to find that? If you're lucky, telling yourself to just do it might be enough. But often this step too requires some tough introspection. Fundamentally, we need to be willing not to just stop avoiding our issues and not just to accept them as they come to us, but to decide that we are going to actively seek them out. We know this story so well from the autobiography when Sri Yukteswar told Paramahansa Yogananda, "My mother once tried to frighten me with an appalling story of a ghost in a dark chamber. I went there immediately and expressed my disappointment at having missed the ghost. Mother never told me another horror tale. Moral, look fear in the face and it will cease to trouble you." We know this story so well. But the point I want to bring out here is Sri Yukteswar, he didn't just wait for the ghost to come to him, maybe sitting down for supper and the ghost wanders up and just wondering what's to eat. No, he went to that dark chamber. He sought out that ghost. And if you look at any of the gurus and all of their great disciples, there wasn't a challenge that came up that they wouldn't run to meet. David Barlow, one of today's acknowledged experts on anxiety, told the New York Times about what the latest research on anxiety shows. He said, "A good patient doesn't only accept fear, he courts it, chases it." So, where do we find this courage to act? I'm going to give a few suggestions. 1, affirmations, as Brother Govindananda was talking about on Monday evening. 2, studying Paramahansa Yogananda's writings with the conscious desire to imbibe that spirit in his writings, which, when you look for it, you will see it everywhere. You will see it even if you're not looking for it. And then, as you read, put what you read into practice. The courage to act is a habit, That can be cultivated like any other habit. 3, meditate on this dauntless quality of the Guru and of all great souls, using the method outlined on page 69 of the booklet Rajarsi Janakananda, a great Western yogi. I'm going to quote that now. Master wrote to Rajarsi, our second president, "Whenever you desire to commune with any saint, think first of his image in the spiritual eye." Right here. Then relax and concentrate in the heart, trying to feel some of his main characteristics. Then lose yourself in that perception, and the soul of those individuals will possess you. You will act, reason, think, feel like them. Now that's how you walk in the Guru's footsteps. Since it's Janmashtami today, a doubly auspicious day, let's look at what the Bhagavad Gita says about the inseparability of courage from an ever-deepening guru-disciple relationship. We see exactly this dynamic playing out in the opening chapter and a half, when Arjuna is complaining bitterly to Krishna about having to fight. Vyasa, the author, he works really hard trying to make us think, gosh, maybe Arjuna's not going to fight. I mean, after all, he's thrown down his weapons. But look, we all know Arjuna's going to fight. We can see there's a lot of pages left in the book, and no epilogue is that long. But Vyasa's working hard on it. And let's imagine what would happen if Arjuna did not fight. Then there would be no job for Krishna, who was only there to act in the battle as Arjuna's charioteer. Krishna would have been free to return to his homeland, Dwarka, thousands of miles away. The message of the Gita is clear. Fight, and the Guru will be with you. Or don't, and, as they say nowadays, let me know how that works out for you. Because we know intuitively how it's going to work out, right? If we are entirely in our comfort zone, the mind is telling us at that time, there's nothing you need right now. That's what a comfort zone is. There's nothing you need, nothing, not even the Guru. One of the fascinating things about the Bhagavad Gita, to my mind at least, is that the setting for the Gita tells us how to conduct our lives just as much as anything that Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. What do I mean? The setting, as we know, is on the eve of the great battle of Kurukshetra, as Krishna, the Guru, tells Arjuna, the disciple, the real significance of the battle he is about to fight. And in that battle, which is the battle each of us has to fight every day in this world, the battle to transcend our lower nature, our ego, Krishna will be Arjuna's charioteer. In other words, Krishna will be Arjuna's Guru. And he will drive Arjuna's chariot, and that chariot is our life in this world, around the battlefield, which signifies the specific challenges that we have created in our past that are now manifesting as our karma. Krishna will steer us to one challenge, then the next, until every last foe is vanquished. This is what liberation really is when you think about it. It's the steady elimination of our fears one by one until there are none left. We're still the one doing the fighting, shooting the arrows, make no mistake about it. But the Guru can steer our lives toward the foes that we are best able to handle in the moment, and can swerve the chariot if we're about to take one in the eye. One of the most touching scenes in the Mahabharata, and the Gita is part of the Mahabharata to me, is when Arjuna's courage falters, when he has to face down Bhishma, the ego, and Krishna, to save the day, decides to break his vow not to fight, and abandons the chariot to go after Bhishma himself. Arjuna snaps out of his mood just in time as Krishna is about to strike, and is just about able to get Krishna to stand down. You can choose to see that as just a story, but maybe it's much more than that. it tells us that the Guru is not dispassionate in his support of our spiritual efforts. He will do whatever it takes. Again, read God's Boatman to see that, to feel that. Facing our fears, of course, is not just a spiritual teaching. It's fundamental in psychological counseling, and we now even have a pretty good idea of how it all works out in the brain. So now we can say that facing our fears changes us in body, mind, and soul. From what I can see, what I've been able to read, every form of treatment for every form of anxiety always, at some point, includes exposure to the anxiety-provoking stimulus as part of the treatment. In other words, facing that anxiety. Why? Because the particular circuit in the brain that gets activated when we are triggered by a fear stimulus can only change, can only learn to behave differently if it has first been activated by the fear-provoking stimulus. And this principle has been summarized as activate to generate. We activate the circuit that encodes that troublesome issue so that we can modify it, change it, by generating new reactions to that issue. We all know the saying, neurons that wire together, that fire together, wire together. But for many years it was not understood exactly how that worked. And we still don't know all the details. But in some aspects, we have an amazing knowledge of how that works. I mean, right down to specific atoms doing specific things at specific times. It's incredible, really. Michael Fanselo, a researcher on fear at UCLA, was asked if it was possible to get over a fear without exposure to that fear. And he replied, "There's no evidence that that will ever happen. Even time doesn't seem to heal fear, per se. What time does is give you the opportunity to expose yourself to it, even if it's not in full doses. Time? Well, that's the one thing Maya is willing to give us free of charge. Everything else we have to fight for." However, there's always a however. There's layers and layers to this. However, there's a right way to face our fears and there's a wrong way. And if we've ever tried to face down a fear and it hasn't worked for us, here are a few things to consider before we try again. The Bhagavad Gita always emphasizes that whatever we do, we are to do with non-attachment, with renunciation, with surrender. But this is easily forgotten, especially if we're new to the path. It takes years to learn to truly live with non-attachment, and the masters do not expect that we will crack this on day one. Because if we did, we'd be masters, and it doesn't work that way. But they would remind us that we have to try to face our fears with non-attachment, leaving the outcome in God's hands. But if instead we grit our teeth, all the time asking, when will this be over? We're just making things worse. We're just heaping fear upon fear. And this can be very subtle. One technique for facing our fears, for example, teaches people to remain calm and relaxed in the face of increasing exposure to that fear. You know, first you imagine it, then you get within 20 feet of it, then you're within 10 feet of it, then you're holding the tarantula or something like that. But some researchers now consider that teaching a person to be relaxed in the face of fear is really just teaching a person that the physiological signs of fear, the pounding heart, all those things, are problems to be feared, to be avoided. And so the person might find a worsening of symptoms as they try to face that fear. It's very subtle. And the technique of interoceptive exposure, it's called, acknowledges this problem and suggests that what we really need to address and the things that we are really afraid of is not the thing that occasions the fear, like we've talked about before, but our physical responses to it. The loss of control in a panic attack, for example. I mean, when's that going to happen again? We don't have control over it. And as techniques for facing our fears and treating anxiety have improved over the last 70 years, at some point it was recognized that an effective treatment involved teaching the patient to accept what was happening in the moment if they hoped to change how they reacted in the future. And acceptance is really just another word for surrender, non-attachment, or renunciation. Can you believe that this only seems to have become reasonably common knowledge in the last 20 years? I mean, how long has the Bhagavad Gita been out? A long time. And the spiritual teachers have always talked about this, and pioneers in psychology, of course. But now, finally, it's commonly accepted, as far as I can understand. But acceptance is tricky. Have we really accepted a situation deep down, or have we just buried our fears at a deeper level? And to try to emphasize the importance of really being sure that we have accepted a situation, people have tacked on various qualifiers and modifiers like radical acceptance and things like that. But however we think of it, we need to be really sure we have accepted. How to do so? By going beyond acceptance, as we've already discussed, to a positive embrace of the situation. And this is why David Barlow, whom I quoted before, and I'll quote again, said, "A good patient doesn't only accept fear, he courts it, chases it." And that's the lesson of the masters. But facing our fears doesn't mean we have to rush into every situation, or any situation, without preparation. Our guru trained for 10 years in Sri Yukteswar's ashram before he came to America, and that was in 1920. Taylor Clark, in his 2011 book, Nerve, Poise Under Pressure, Serenity Under Stress, and the Brave New Science of Fear and Cool, lists the following factors that allow a person to face their fears without becoming overwhelmed. It's a useful list. Confidence, so studies have shown that these things make a difference. Confidence, training, locus of control, do we feel in control? Tolerance for uncertainty, humor, and task focus. Now, I think many of these factors automatically get taken care of as we learn to develop our faith and our trust in the guru-disciple relationship. Take tolerance for uncertainty, for example. Brother Premamoy, who was house brother for the young monks for decades, used to affirm and live by the following motto: Divine Mother, I don't know why this is happening to me, but you do, and that's good enough for me. One of the monks told me of a time he felt very overwhelmed by the responsibilities he had been given near the beginning of his monastic life. He worked in Sri Dayamata's office at the time, and one day Ma asked him how he was doing. He was honest in his reply. He was overwhelmed. Ma smiled and said, I have given everything to you for a purpose. It was to quickly and thoroughly stretch and expand your awareness of what the SRF work is all about. And most importantly, so you could experience and expand what you are truly capable of. Anything that gives you pause and makes you doubt your thinking and abilities hinders your relationship with God and Guru. Tear it all aside and face everything that crosses your path. Master did the same with all of us. And indeed, somehow, everything seemed to get done in some shape or fashion, and some things were eventually given to others to lighten the load, eventually. Speaking about the guru-disciple relationship once, Brother Nandamoy said, there comes a time when the guru is helping you, but you don't know whether it's the guru or just the fact that you are in tune with him. It's a way of life. Whatever happens, happens, and you're absolutely safe and comfortable with that. You are in his arms. That's the guru-disciple relationship. And it deepens and develops life after life as we put in the effort. And then one day, we are free. Brother Paramahansa, who worked for many years in Sri Dayamata's office, said that she told him once, if you make the smallest effort, you have no idea of the doors he will open for you. So let's summarize everything we've talked about. 1. Ask, what am I avoiding? Come up with a list, or just start with one thing if that's what it takes to get the ball rolling. 2. Dig down past all the excuses for each item on the list and say, the time for excuses is past. 3. Develop a plan for addressing each item on the list. 4. Call on God and Guru to help you and know that they will. In fact, because you are addressing the things that need to be addressed, that they want you to address, you will be able to feel their help even if you don't ask for it. But ask for it anyway. 5. Get stuck in. 6. Enjoy the feelings of attunement with God and Guru that might previously have only been accessible in moments of dire need. 7. Once you've checked off the first item, start on the next. It's okay to take a little break between items. That's not avoidance, probably. Now let's take a big step back and try to put everything in context. Let's not forget why we're going to all this effort. A devotee was once telling me just how fed up he was with God at that moment in time because of all the problems that he had to deal with. And it's not impossible to see how somebody might feel like that from time to time. But I somehow felt that he might be open to having his feelings challenged on this. I could see he wasn't enjoying those feelings. So I took a bit of a risk, and I told him that the real truth was that he actually wanted to have all those problems. And he said to me, what do you mean by that? And I said, okay, before each of us existed as an individual, that spark of consciousness that is now in you was part of God, and still is, for that matter, right? And he said, okay. So that spark of consciousness was fully complicit in the decision to separate itself out into an individual soul, right? Okay. Why did it do that? I said. Obviously, because it wanted to go through the experience of being an individual soul and all that that entails. It is in this sense that you, the God spark within, the real you, wanted this, all of it, because it wanted to experience the joy of facing and ultimately triumphing over all the challenges of this incredible show. I could see this devotee's perspective change right in front of me, and I was relieved by that. He realized that no, his problems were not the heartless imposition of an uncaring, distant God. Be of good cheer, Jesus said. I have overcome this world. I didn't always appreciate that Bible quote, but I love it now. The Guru doesn't do our job for us, but he shows us the way so that we can have the joy of overcoming. We get to experience the joy of having done the work to liberate ourselves without ever having cause to be arrogant about it, which would rather defeat the purpose and stop it from happening anyway. And we get to share it with someone that has been with us every step along the way for incarnations. Think about what you will feel in that moment. It is waiting for us all. Jai Guru. So now we're going to have a guided meditation, and I'll be taking my seat in front of the harmonium. Now I'm going to read the Guru's poem, When I Am Only a Dream. In this guided meditation, you have one job, and it's the same whether you're a disciple, or thinking of becoming a disciple, or just simply curious about what a Guru really is. You have to get to the point of feeling what the Guru is expressing to you in this poem. This will require deep concentration. You will have to ignore the fact that the sentiments are being channeled to you through verse and my voice. And when I read this poem to myself, I alter the first and fourth lines so that the poem is specifically to and for me. I'm not going to do that here. You can try it if you want to read the poem yourself at some other time, as well as in Songs of the Soul. It's in Lesson 16, the Guru-Disciple Relationship. And in our Lessons app, Sri Dayamata also reads this poem, the auxiliary material for that lesson. So now, put yourself mentally in the presence of the Guru. To do this, think first of the image of the Guru in your spiritual eye. Now, while still experiencing the Guru, not just as a photograph or an image, but as a living presence in the spiritual eye, bring the region of your heart into your awareness. And try to feel one of the Guru's main qualities, whatever you most want to experience in the moment. Maybe it's courage, maybe it's devotion, seeing the Guru in the spiritual eye, experiencing that quality you want to develop in the heart. Absorb yourself in those feelings. And as I read the poem, keep that particular quality in your heart, keeping your eyes closed to minimize distractions. Whatever spiritual characteristic you wish to develop at this time, you will be able to feel it in the words of this poem, because they are the words that come from the consciousness of an avatar. I come to tell you all of him, the Guru tells us, and the way to encase him in your bosom. And the discipline that brings his grace. Those of you who have asked me to guide you to my beloved's presence, I warn you through my silently talking mind, or speak to you through a gentle, significant glance, or whisper to you through my love, or loudly dissuade you when you stray away from him. But when I shall become only a memory, or a mental image, or silently speaking voice, when no earthly call will ever reveal my whereabouts in unplumbed space, when no shallow entreaty or stern stentorian command will bring from me an answer, I will smile in your mind when you are right, and when you are wrong, I will weep through my eyes, dimly peering at you in the dark, and weep through your eyes perchance. And I will whisper to you through your conscience, and I will reason with you through your reason, and I will love all through your love. When you are able no longer to talk with me, read my whispers from eternity. Eternally through it I will talk to you. Unknown, I will walk by your side and guard you with invisible arms. And as soon as you know my beloved and hear his voice in silence, you will know me again more tangibly than you knew me on this earth plane. And yet, when I am only a dream to you, I will come to remind you that you too are naught but a dream of my heavenly beloved. And when you know you are a dream, as I know now, we will be ever awake in him. Om. Peace. Amen.